Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Quinton Covington, and today we are going to be talking about something that has the potential to change how you see the world. I have graduated from Johns Hopkins University with a degree in neuroscience, so I've spent quite a lot of time studying how the mind and brain works. And I think it's really important for not just neuroscientists, but for everybody to understand how their mind and brain works, because everything you perceive, everything you think goes through this incredible piece of machinery inside your head. In other words, knowing your mind and knowing your brain is the same thing as understanding yourself. And if you want to change any part of who you are, or become a more authentic version of yourself, you must first become aware of who you are right now. And that is the purpose of this video and the rest of the videos that I post on this channel. Today we are going to focus on the nature of perception versus interpretation, because these two often get tied together, but distinguishing them is what allows you to change how you see the world entirely. If you can shift how you interpret your perceptions, you will have the ability to change your behavioral patterns. You will have the ability to change how other people see you. And most importantly, you will have the ability to understand and become your most authentic and powerful self. So let's get into what this really means. What do I mean by perception, and what do I mean by interpretation? If you haven't seen my last video on perception, I highly recommend you go and watch it, because there I talk about it in a little bit more detail, but it's definitely worth for me to go over it again. Perception is very basically what you see in the world. So when you open your eyes and look at any object, light from that object bounces from the sun or some other light source, hits your eye, and your eye activates. And I choose this word very intentionally. Your eye does not see this light. Your eye is a piece of machinery that activates when hit by light. When it activates, it sends electrical signals through its cells, called neurons. It sends these electrical signals to your brain in a place called the occipital lobe here. This is where seeing happens. It doesn't happen in the eye. It only happens once the eye sends an electrical signal down these neurons, and the brain is able to translate these signals into something your mind can use. Your eye is a very complex piece of machinery. You can't think of it as a camera. It activates differently depending on the wavelength of light. That would be color, red versus blue versus green. It activates differently if something is moving fast versus slow. It activates differently depending on how far away something is from you. But each of these characteristics in your eye only exist as electrical signals. You have neurons that are responsible for color. And if that neuron detects red, for example, it will fire very quickly. And if not, it will fire very slowly. And your brain looks at the speed that the red neuron is firing at and is able to interpret, oh, this eye is seeing red. I go through this entire process just to say that your sight, even though it looks very realistic and very convincing, in your brain only exists as a bunch of these signals happening at different rates, all happening together at the same time in a way that your brain can reconstruct to translate what your eye is detecting. In other words, your visual experience is only this collection of firing rates, only this collection of electrical signals. This is important because your eye can only detect a certain kind of light. There is a lot of information coming off of this object. There's infrared light, there's UV light, there's heat. There's a lot of information that your eye simply doesn't detect. Even if it hits your eye, there is no neuron capable of changing its firing rate based on that light. Why is this relevant? Well, even though we only get this small amount of information, we tend to use this information to make huge judgments about what things are. For example, you might look at a person, what they are visually, the kind of hair they have, what they're wearing. You might look at their eye color, their skin color, and based on only that visual information, you decide, I know who this person is. Even though visual information, as rich as it is, as beautiful as it is so limited, we often use it to make really large assumptions about the world around us. These assumptions are what I call interpretation. You interpret what your eyes see, what you hear with your ears, what you smell, and you take that interpretation at face value, when in reality, this interpretation is based off of so little information. This person might have a completely different past than the one you're assigning them based on your judgment. They might have a completely different attitude. They might just be a completely different person than you are assuming. When you hear somebody speak, they might say something and you might hear it in a way that you interpret is rude. They say something rude or negligent or judgmental. And based on what your ear hears and sends electrically to your brain with its limited amount of information, you interpret this person as a rude person, as a negligent person, as a judgmental person. They are bad, let's say. And you don't want to communicate with them. Maybe that's okay. There's no inherent problem with that. But my point is, you come up with this judgment of the person using such a limited amount of information, when the true identity, the true past, how that person is currently feeling, also plays a huge role in why they sounded this way. Even though you were able to make this judgment, this interpretation of who they are, based on such little amount of information. They could have had a terrible day. They could have just found out they were sick. Maybe they just lost their job. There are so many different factors that could play into this that are not available through your perception, because your perception is very limited. You cannot really see the past. You cannot see the future. You cannot see how someone is truly feeling. Eventually, you might be able to get to these things by sitting with a person, conversing with them, sharing ideas, and really getting to know them, when you can gather enough information through your perception. But whenever you are just talking to someone and you see them for the first time, or you just gather a limited amount of verbal, auditory, visual information about them, all of these are not playing a real part in your perception. They're not playing a real part in your interpretation. And as a result, you come to judgments that can be utterly false, but still completely impact how you see them and potentially how you see the rest of the world. When I say this, it makes it sound like we shouldn't rely on our perception at all to make judgments about the world. But I'm not saying that. What I want to get at is our limited perception is actually our power. As a human being, you have the power to assign interpretations to your perception. You have the power to choose not to think this person is a bad person if they mistreat you, if they're rude, negligent, or judgmental. You have the power to think maybe this person is having a rough day and I will choose to treat them with kindness even though they don't deserve it, because maybe that will make their day better. You have the power to interpret a rainy day as the chance to spend time with your family inside, instead of interpreting it as a barrier to getting your work done or the kind of weather that makes you feel bad. You have the power to choose any of your interpretations of your perception. And because it's so limited, your creativity is really your ceiling. When you wake up in the morning and you feel like you don't want to get out of bed, you feel tired, this is your opportunity to overcome how you feel and still go to the gym and work out. In doing that, you become stronger. But you know what? You would have never had this opportunity to become stronger if you didn't feel weak in the first place. That is the power of interpretation. Your weakness is not bad. It's not something to run away from. Your weakness is the opportunity to become stronger. if you feel dumb, if you feel like you don't know enough, if you don't feel worthy, these are all opportunities to grow. Every single person on this earth has weaknesses. They have things that they're not good at. They have things that they wish they were better at. And they will look at other people and maybe they'll become jealous because they think, I can't have that thing. But all they need to do is shift their perspective to see these weaknesses as opportunities. That's what makes the difference between a truly great person, a person who's able to overcome adversity, a person who's able to really achieve great things. They see any barrier in their way as an opportunity or a challenge. And every time they overcome this challenge, they become better. They evolve through their adversity. This is what it means to be alive. This is what it means to be human. There is no human on earth who is born perfect. Your experience here and the quality of your life is heavily dependent on your ability to see what you're missing and not look at it as a limitation or misfortune. Your responsibility is to see it as something to overcome. And once you overcome your weakness, your inability to do something, once you find a way to become better, to evolve, your reality, your world, your surroundings will evolve with you. Everything will evolve. That is the power of interpretation. This can apply to any field, whether you're in school. If you interpret your failed math test as, I am bad at math, you will always be bad at math. Your brain is going to take this interpretation and make sure you can't do math because you already told it. That's what this F means. I am bad at math. But if you take this F and interpret it as the opportunity to grow in logical and mathematical ability, your brain will see every single math problem as a chance to improve, and you will learn. Its ability to learn math is not dependent on how many math problems you do. Partially it is, but it's heavily dependent on how you see each math problem. If you see each math problem as further evidence that I am bad at math because it's challenging, your brain is just going to learn that. It's just going to learn that every time you see a math problem, it's going to be hard. That's what it learns to do. But if you see every math problem as a chance to improve, as a chance to learn, your brain will pick that up and it will learn that every time I do a math problem, I get better at math. Or this math problem gets easier. That is the power of interpretation. Once you don't allow your brain and your mind to come up with automatic interpretations based on your past, based on your unconscious thinking patterns, based on your habits, based on what you were taught to think as a kid, based on what your friends told you is reality. Once you take control of this yourself, you become infinite. You become unstoppable. Nobody's words will be able to tell you, you can't do this. You have the power to eliminate that from your vocabulary. Everything you perceive, every challenge, every obstacle can be looked at as an opportunity. Instead of you can't do this, I can't do this yet. But as soon as I'm able to do that, I know I will have evolved as a person and my environment will evolve with me. The people around me will change to match my frequency, to match my new identity. And I will be able to use this new ability that I gained in overcoming this challenge to accomplish so much more in my life. That is the power of interpretation. So I really encourage you to reframe how you look at the world as a whole. How do you watch the news? How do you interpret how your friends behave? How do you interpret your relationship with your family? These are all important questions that usually go on automatically. But you have the power to interpret. Maybe my mom acts this way because she was raised in a way that hurt her, and she's only reflecting that in her behavior as a mother. Maybe my friend is mistreating me today because something terrible happened to him and he doesn't have the strength to share it with me right now. So what would be my next best course of action? These are all things that you have the power to think about and control, but only if you allow yourself to become aware of them. That is the key. As I was saying at the beginning of the video, awareness is the key. You can only change once you become aware. You cannot change something intentionally that you're not aware of in the first place. So now that you've watched this video, and now that you know how your mind or your brain perceives the world, and in turn, how you are able to interpret that very limited information into something greater for yourself and for others, practice this. Become aware of even the smallest interpretations. The creative person is able to take basic interpretations, like looking at a pen and thinking, this is a pen for writing. Instead of thinking this is just for writing, they can see the potential to use this to draw a beautiful picture. You can use your interpretation infinitely. There is no limit to your creativity when it comes to interpretation. So I encourage you to use this in every single aspect of your life, and I promise you, you will become a more powerful, more capable, and a more in control person than you may have ever been before. And all it takes is this shift in perspective between perception and interpretation. So, if you want to hear more about the nature of perception and interpretation, that's what my channel is all about. Understanding the mind. If you can understand how your mind perceives things and how your mind interprets things, these two are the key to gaining agency and control over your life. So I will do more videos on more specific topics like communication. How does your brain perceive communication, sounds, words, etc.? And then how does your brain interpret communication? And more importantly, how can you use this in your own life to become more authentic and more in control? That is the goal. I look forward to seeing you guys next time because I really have a lot to share and this is important to me. This information, as I was studying in Johns Hopkins, I realized was really important. This is not information that should be kept by the scientific community or the neuroscience community because every single one of us has a brain. And if we don't learn how to use it properly, we are limiting ourselves so much. And I want everyone to be able to fulfill their most authentic potential and have agency over their life, their emotions, and how they see the world. So, thank you guys again for watching, and I'll see you guys again next time.